Hello, thanks for checking out the Rubbish Guitar Blokes All About Guitars video series. As someone striving to become an intermediate guitarist with a growing addiction of all things guitar, I thought why not share my discoveries with other addicts. In this video we shall be looking at all aspects of the guitar neck. The neck width, its depth, its shape, the fretboard radius, and the selection of wood materials. As is usual, there are many theories and opinions as to why you must have this or the other, but we all know that
Opinions are like assholes. Everybody has one.
I'll touch upon these generalizations in this video, so that you can make your own informed choices. But as always, which one to choose is entirely a matter of personal preference and comfort. It's about how it feels in your very own unique mittens. So now let's look at the neck profile, by which we mean the neck shape. As you can see, there's a massive range to choose from, but to help us understand them, we can think of them as simply being variations of several basic shapes. By far the most common profile is the C shape. It's really a semicircle, and most peeps will be familiar with the way the C profile feels, so it serves as a great baseline for comparison of the others. It's a comfortable oval.
You said it was a semicircle, please make your mind up.
It's a comfortable oval profile, which works well for most playing styles. Not as deep as the U and V shapes that we'll look at next. A flattened variation of the traditional C shape is called a modern C or flat oval. A deep C profile can be mistaken for a U profile, but there is a difference.
My brain hurts!
V-shaped necks are pretty old school and show up on many reissued instruments. Many modern players may find the shape incompatible with their range of movement. But blues guitarists and those who position their thumb over the top of the fretboard find the V-shape ideal. There are three variations: the pointed hard V, the rounded soft V, and the medium V. The U profile is very similar to the C profile, it is just much deeper with visible vertical shoulders, making it feel chunky and rounded. Especially deep U-shaped necks, like those found on some Telecaster guitars, are sometimes referred to as baseball bats. They are good for players with large hands, and those who are more comfortable with their thumb on the back or side of the neck. It provides a very comfortable surface for chord work, regardless of hand size. The D profile is wider than a standard C-shaped neck, and always flatter on the bottom, which makes it feel thinner. Some find the flattened underside makes the neck feel much faster in the treble range. It certainly makes playing a wider neck more tolerable and feels similar to a classical guitar's neck shape. Asymmetrical shapes are usually based on a C shape to create a neck that plays easily in both treble and bass ranges, making them good for both fast runs and comfy for chords. This is achieved by thinning the treble side of the profile and thickening the bass side. Quite a few guitarists adopt this ergonomic neck style for their signature guitars. Finally, let's look at a modern design, the Strandberg Ingeo neck. You will either love it or hate it. Designed to promote a straight wrist angle, preventing hand fatigue and injury. Here's a little chat from Philip McKnight at Know Your Gear.
Now, once you pick up this guitar and put your hands on the neck, you're going to notice the neck is very different, as you can see right here. It's called the Endure neck, and it utilizes flat surfaces rather than round profiles. You can see how your thumb will want to follow these lines and put your hand in a perfect playing position.
Now let us look at neck width. When we refer to a guitar's neck width, we are talking about the entire width at the nut. Neck width dictates the spacing between the strings, which greatly affects playability. The best neck width for you is the one that feels the most comfortable for your particular style. Everyone has their own fat or thin, short or long fingers, and has unique preferences and requirements. Classical guitars with nylon strings vibrate a lot more than steel strings do. Therefore they need more space between the strings and have wider necks. Typically around 51 mm or 2 inches. Acoustic guitar necks vary in width. A string spacing is dependent on their particular playing style, with fingerstyle having wider necks than a standard steel string guitar. The neck width of an electric guitar is typically 42.9 mm, or 1 11/16 inches. However, there is no standardized width, and each brand has their own specific width. Hence there is a wide range between 41.3 and 44.5 millimeters. In old money, that's 1 5/8 to 1 3/4 inches. And this 3 millimeters variation between widths can significantly affect the playability. Now let us consider the neck depth. This is measured from the face of the fretboard at the first fret to the deepest part on the back of the neck. Whether you have a preference for a fat or a thin neck will be dependent on your hand size and flexibility. Thin necks measure up to 20 millimeters. Medium up to 22. And thick are 23 millimeters and above. Most necks taper, that is, they get thicker towards the guitar body. And to give an indication as to how a neck may feel, the 1st fret and 12th fret depth measurements are often quoted. Now let us look at the fretboard radius. Often just called the neck radius, this refers to the amount of curvature, or roundness of the fretboard. The smaller the radius, the smaller the circle, and the greater the degree of curvature. Now looking from a historical perspective from the 1960s. Fender guitars in the 50s and 60s had a 7.25-inch radius. This is quite round and, probably today's, most uncommonly chosen, fretboard radius. It wasn't until the 80s that Fender added a 9.5-inch radius. This is now the modern Fender radius. Also in the 80s, PRS brought out their 10-inch radius. Since the 60s, solid-body Gibsons have had a 12-inch radius. Today, this is regarded as the modern standard and most widely used radius. It provides the best of both worlds, in both chords and solos well. Also in the 80s, the shredder guitars, like Ibanez, Chevelle, and Jackson, adopted the 16-inch radius. More recently, Strandberg has brought out the 20-inch radius. A modern design is to have a compound radius. Here, the nut region is rounder, and hence, better for playing chords. Whilst towards the bridge, the radius is increased, making it flatter and more suited for soloing. Common compound radii are 9.5-inch at the nut, and 14-inch towards the bridge, or 12 to 16-inch. Here's an insight from Highline Guitars.
When you look at guitars in general, I'm talking classical, acoustic, electric bass, the fretboard radius seems to only be a major concern with the electric guitar. And all the other instruments, it seems to be less of an issue. If you look at a classical guitar, for example, the fretboards are usually dead flat. With acoustic guitars, the radius typically ranges from about 16 inches to 20 inches. And there are a number of guitar builders out there, luthiers, who make acoustic guitars with absolutely dead flat fretboards, no radius whatsoever. And I've noticed that with bass guitars, bass electric guitars, radius is of no concern.
And here's a good chat from Stringjoy.
And the radius is the curvature of the fingerboard across the neck and is often described by a number. In the US, we typically measure radius in inches. Typical sizes are 7.25 inches, 9.5, 10, 12, all the way up to 16 inches. And the way we get to this is by completing the circle that the fingerboard starts. The radius is a straight line center to the circumference of a circle. The higher the number, the flatter the radius of the fingerboard is. Your radius preference has more to do with your playing style than anything else. Vintage Fenders used a 7.25 radius, give it a very natural and relaxed feel. Because of the pronounced curvature of the board, you can easily play chords. Also, if you're a thumb rapper, like I am, 7.25 is great. Vintage Gibsons from the same period used a 12-inch radius. This would be a much flatter radius than the 7.25 of the vintage Fenders. This works better for soloing and lead playing as you have a more even response across the whole fretboard. To go a step further, the speed-friendly guitars of the 80s, the shredder guitars, used a radius of 16 inches. Again, this puts your playing focus on the soloing and riffing. The even response makes it much easier to fly across the board quickly while you're sweep picking or economy picking or tapping or whatever. Some modern builders offer a compound radius. This is not one, but let's just imagine. You can kind of have the best of both worlds. So imagine this was a 12-inch radius down by the nut, and that's where you do your chording, and that transitions all the way to a 16-inch radius by the heel, and that's where you can let loose and go crazy.
And here's some great theory from Oren.
Why is your fretboard radiused? Why is it not just flat? The easy answer is playability. With a radius on the fretboard, it more easily conforms to your hand and what it naturally wants to do. Most people, when you close your hand, it doesn't close in a square, it closes in a circle of some description. Your hand articulates kind of circularly in a radius, effectively, which means that when you're holding the guitar neck, if it's got a radius on the fretboard, it will more naturally match what the human hand does. In general, a tighter radius will make chords easier. That's pretty much what it comes down to. If you go too tight on a radius, when you bend the string, it can choke out because you're bending the string around a radius more. And it can just choke out. A shallower radius, so with a larger number, is easier to solo and easier to bend. It's just a little bit more articulate, I guess, would be the way. This comes back to the compound radius and why you might want it. If you've got a tighter radius around the nut, where you generally do a lot more chording, that's nice. And as you get up past the 12th fret, it becomes more, well, as you go up towards the 12th fret and beyond, it gets flatter, which is easier for soloing. Generally, we don't do an awful lot of chords up around the 12th fret, and not often do we do a lot of soloing down around the 1st and 2nd frets. So a compound radius in that sense makes a lot of sense.
So to summarize, the top factor in choosing your radius is to get the one that feels the most comfortable, as everyone's hands and fingers are different in size and shape. There are bucket loads of theories, and keyboard warriors will argue why you must have a certain radius, but it basically comes down to two perspectives. Do you play bar chords or do you shred? Bar chords require a single finger to depress multiple strings. And as that finger is curved, it helps if the fretboard is also curved, to match your specific finger. Shredders are interested in speed and bends. Flatter fretboards facilitate speed and accuracy. Bending strings on a flat is easier than bending on a curve. Now let us look at those materials commonly used on the guitar neck. The neck and fretboard are usually made from different materials, because the neck needs to allow some flex and resonance. But the fretboard needs to be dense and hard wearing. Maple is the most common wood for electric guitar necks. Mahogany has an uniform density, and this makes for very stable necks. And being less dense than maple with an open pore structure, it absorbs some of the string vibration, hence has a warmer, fatter tone. Koa has a tone that lies between mahogany and maple. It has a sweeter top end. Rosewood gives great sustain while also smoothing out some of the highs. And Wench, a black hardwood, has a coarse texture and is stiff and very strong. Now let's look at a great clip from Highline Guitars, in which he talks about roasted guitar necks.
Torrefied wood. Now, you may never have heard of torrefied wood, although I think many of you watching know exactly what I'm talking about. It's also known as roasted wood. And what it is wood that has been kiln dried using a process that heats it up to a very high temperature, to the point where the wood would normally burn. But it doesn't burn because they remove all the oxygen from the kiln. So the wood just gets really super hot, and what it does is it drives out all the moisture, and then it changes the cellular structure of the wood so that once the wood is removed from the kiln and cooled down, it's not going to absorb water or moisture. You can even submerge it into a tank of water for extended periods of time, and it's not going to absorb the water. It also doesn't absorb the very fine particles associated with water vapor in humidity. So it's very, very effective at resisting the absorption of moisture, and therefore it remains stable. It doesn't move at all. The only downside to it is the appearance may not be appealing to everybody. The wood tends to take on kind of a darker brown color once it's gone through that roasting process.
The traditional fretboard materials were maple, rosewood, and ebony. Maple has a bright tone, with good sustain and bite. Structurally, it is as durable and as dense as ash, but far easier to work. Maple is available in many varieties, and grain structures which includes flame, quilted, and bird's eye. As maple ages, marks develop, and many vintage guitars may develop a blotchy appearance. Rosewood was once the most common fretboard material. A hard, dense, and naturally oily wood, it has a tone richer than that of maple. However, global regulations have today restricted the use of Brazilian rosewood. But Indian rosewood is still available. Ebony features a bright attack, great sustain, and excellent durability. It does, however, have a brittle grain structure, and care must be taken when inserting metal frets. Asian ebony often exhibits a variable patternation with brown stripes, whereas African ebony has the more desirable uniform color. Pau ferro is a relatively new option. It is very similar to rosewood. Fender now use Pau ferro in their entire Mexican-made range of guitars. The range of newly emerging alternative fretboard woods includes Ovancal, Macassar ebony, Jatoba, Indian laurel, Padok, Panga Panga, and Merbau. Most recent developments feature synthetic materials for fretboard facings. Richlight is a paper-based carbon fiber composite and substitutes for ebony. It was pioneered by Gibson in the mid-90s. Micarta, a carbon fiber composite which is reinforced with fiberglass, is also a substitute for ebony and is used by Martin guitars. Finally, we have Rocklight. This is a composite blend of eucalyptus and tulip wood, and is available in both a rosewood and an ebony format. Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you liked this video. Till next time.
I'll be back.